Hi, I'm Taylor and I'm going to be discussing the scientist role for antisocial personality disorder, which is also called ASPD. So the first study that I researched was called Evaluating Dysfunction in Cognition and Reward Among Offenders with Antisocial Personality Disorder. So this took 116 men from a maximum security prison between the ages of 18 and 75 and to find the dysfunctions in those with antisocial personality disorder. So the first thing that they did was an interview with the prisoner to determine whether or not they did have ASPD or not. So then after they found out if they did have ASPD, they completed 3 tasks. One was a visual search task, the second one was an in-back task, and the third one was a gambling task. I will go into these on the next slide. And the importance of this was to understand these certain dysfunctions so that they could identify what kind of treatment they specifically needed to focus on in those with ASPD. So on slide 3, in the first image on the right, part A shows the perception task, which shows that would show the prisoner 3 images, 2 with the same color and 1 with not, and the prisoner would have to identify the odd color out, and this the researcher would record how fast they give the feedback back to them. And then the second one is the executive functioning task, or the in-back task. So the researcher would present a letter like T, and then they would present a second letter like D, in which that's not the same letter, so the prisoner would not hit the button. But if it was, the researcher would present D, and then they would also present the second letter D, then the prisoner would hit their button. And then the researcher would record how fast they hit their button, and if they hit their button correctly or incorrectly. And then part C of this is the decision-making task, which is the gambling task. So they would present them with 2 options. One would be a for sure option, you would get it, or one would be like a risky option, which you would either get all or nothing. And this would show if the prisoner with antisocial personality disorder is more risky or not, and how fast they would provide feedback. So after they did all these tasks, they observed that there was no significant difference with those with ASPD and those without in the final observations. So after they did that, they did in the same study, they showed a graph that those with ASPD had a higher IES score, which was a worse speed accuracy for high reward compared with low reward. So those with ASPD had a not as good of a speed accuracy score for high reward compared with low. So these results show that there is no sign of a prominent factor to be an underlying issue of ASPD. The study also showed that those with ASPD have a worse speed accuracy for interactions involving a higher reward. And then also showed that those with ASPD may perceive an abnormality during executive functioning that could cause maladaptive behaviors. Future studies, the results from this, the researchers said that future people should ask those with ASPD what decision they would make without giving them the full knowledge of what they should do, so that they can show which part that they did not need in order to make a decision, and they can go from there with developing their hypothesis for thinking that. So study number 2 was involving 674 incarcerated males between the ages of 18 and 45. And this involves 3 different groups, those with ASPD and psychopathy, and then those with ASPD and without psychopathy, and those with neither ASPD nor psychopathy. So psychopathy is considered a personality disorder characterized by persistent antisocial behavior, impaired empathy, remorse, and bold, disinhibited, and egotistical traits. So a lot of people think that psychopathy is just a worse condition of ASPD. So this study, the goal of it was to investigate whether ASPD and psychopathy are like the same disorder or they're a little bit different, and to know how to form assessment strategies to prove importance of developing interventions to target psychopathology underlying these syndromes. So first they used a questionnaire called PCLR, which determined if someone was a psychopath. So those with a score on this of above 30 are typically known as a psychopath. And then after that, they put them into groups of violent crimes, nonviolent crimes, and criminal versatility. So these results showed that antisocial personality disorder plus psychopathy were charged with more types of offenses and had more violent and nonviolent crimes than those without both ASPD and psychopathy, and those with only ASPD. So the difference in severity of ASPD and psychopathy contributed to the group difference for nonviolent charges. ASPD and psychopathology group responded more slowly on cognitive tasks than the control group, which was those with neither of those disorders. So future studies that these researchers suggest that they should research is those with psychopathy have a unique contribution to the prediction of criminal behavior and cognitive functioning. So how does ASPD not solely correlate with psychopathy? So what else correlates with psychopathy? And then they also said to examine the specific impairments predicted by the left hemisphere and other cognitive perspectives. The third study that I researched was called Why Run the Risk? Motivation for Offenses by Patients with Substance Use and Antisocial Personality Disorders, which they rated as most risky to their own well-being. So this took 127 patients, which were 117 were men, between the ages of 18 and 65 that were enrolled in treatment for substance use disorder. And the goal of this was to study the motives for offending behavior in an outpatient sample with comorbid antisocial personality disorder and substance use disorder. So basically they wanted to study how ASPD and SUD are together to work together to find a motive to do an offense. So they used a questionnaire called OMQ to measure 4 factors. One was financial gain, the second one was provocation, and the third one was excitement, and the fourth one was compliance. So the image to the top left on slide 10 shows that personality traits definitely are a motivation for committing an offense, but it also shows age and the type of offense are also motivations to commit an offense. But this is what this study is going to research how age and gender or the type of offense is a motivation to commit another offense. So the results from this show that anxiety, sensitivity, and aggression were associated with higher scores of offending due to provocation. Motivations for offending among substance users with comorbid with ASPD are like previous finding in criminal justice samples. So it shows that anxiety and aggression and how sensitive you are will make you more likely to do another offense, but we do not know exactly how this is. So they want future researchers to be more specific in how aggression and sensitization need to be further researched to prevent substance users with ASPD to do offending behaviors. And then they also want individual motives need to be assessed in the light of type of offense under consideration, so that different types of individuals with different motives under a certain type of circumstance will commit another offense. So there's also different types of circumstances. Thank you.